Professor of Strategy here at IESE Business School, and welcome. We're broadcasting at 4 o'clock here in Europe and in Spain. It should be 10 o'clock in the morning if my calculations are correct in New York, and 10 o'clock in the evening for anybody who's watching the broadcast in Asia. Sorry it's so late, but it's the only way we can figure this out so it all works. This is being broadcast live on IESE's LinkedIn channel. It's also on our YouTube channel, and also La Vanguardia, a newspaper here in town, is also broadcasting it on their own digital platform. So welcome to the session. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce my guest today, or our guest today, José Luis Nueno.
Hi.
José Luis
Hi.
is a professor of marketing here at IESE. He's been teaching at the school for a long time. He's been my friend and colleague for over 30 years. José Luis has taught, he's actually got his PhD from Harvard. He's taught at Harvard as well as INSEAD, the University of Michigan, a number of other places around the world. I kind of lost count of the books. There's 10 or 12 of them.
Circa.
Circa. I got one of them right here with me. I'll talk about it a little bit later. There's a science fiction author called William Gibson, and he says that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And in my opinion, I've watched José Luis for many years. He's very, very good at spotting the future when not everybody else can spot it. And 30 years ago, he was setting up some of the first shopping centers here in Spain. 20 years ago, I remember him setting up some of the first flagship stores. I think he set up Sony's flagship store here in Barcelona. 10 or 15 years ago, you were working with a mattress company selling mattresses on television.
Grupo Lo Mónaco.
La Monaco, yeah. And as far as I can see, you've always been not one, but 2 or 3 steps ahead of the curve. And it's just a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, José Luis, let's just get started right away into the meat of this thing, because what we're talking about is consumer behavior and brands and marketing in the context of this terrible virus, which has affected this country and so many other countries around the world. How do you feel that consumers have behaved, because of the virus? Some countries have been locked down longer, some not so much. But what do you think has been consumer behavior as a result of this whole thing?
Well, consumer behavior has changed for the first time with respect to all the types of consumption that were being done. Everything, every category, product category that people consume has been affected. I mean, some have been affected in a dreadful fashion, such as apparel, for instance, or hotels, restaurants, travel, coffee shops, all these kind of businesses. Others have been less affected, although everyone, for instance, we always look at food as one category that has been blessed by this crisis. In fact, during the first month of the crisis, which was was when we were confined and we started to consume basically basic edibles, but we accumulated them in huge quantities, up to 18% more than usual. What we were spending in food during this month
in the
supermarkets was 18% more, and we were spending it in proximity, which is a big surprise. I mean, we have stopped traveling far away to the hypermarket to buy the goods because we had a guy nearby home who was there waiting for us with his mask. We would call him on the telephone. He would be in the door of the store with the products that we have bought from them. So the hero has been the proximity retailer, and this has been a significant change. We have bought lots of basics first, then there was a week or so during May that we consumed discretionary products in food too. We consumed snacks and liquor and wine and beer, and then we stopped it again to go back to basics.
This when you say we, are you talking about Spain, or is this a European phenomenon,
or is
this a global phenomenon?
I would tell you that the reactions have been pretty similar, at least in the westernized countries, but everything that I will be mentioning with regards to the consumer, I can support it with data of Europe. I don't know if it's exactly the same in every place in the world, but in Europe it has been pretty similar in all the places. And among other things that we have done is what I was telling you, this big expenditure in these product categories we were traveling to store with an unusual frequency. I mean, people usually, the weekly shopping trip is every 10 days, so weekly, every 10 days,
10 days, yeah.
weeks of 10 days. But this time we were visiting daily, or more than daily, because it was also the opportunity to get out. And
Because in this country and other countries, it's the only excuse you had to leave the house.
it's
was to go shopping.
extremely severe confinement, and it was one way of eluding it in some way or another. No, so this has been a real has had a real impact in this territory of behavior. What is coming first is confinement, and this has been some certain behavior. For instance, apparel has fallen. People say that apparel has done extremely well online. It's not true. Apparel has done very poorly online in the beginning. In fact, even without competition, retailers of apparel were doing less than what they were doing when they had no competition, because people were simply not buying. I mean, why would I buy
You don't buy
something?
new clothes if you're not leaving the house.
Yeah, I'm not going to leave the house. But in addition, spring is typically a season, summer, spring, that starts with a season of festivities where you have the weddings, the communions, you have the trips, you have going back to the office, these kind of things, which usually entail expanding in costly clothes. What do you spend now in clothes in this season? Shorts and T-shirts. Huh? So this is what we are spending now, and what we didn't spend is the more expensive merchandise, which is a merchandise that typically is reserved for the beginning of the season. The amazing thing has been everything tele. Huh? We have had in 2 months roughly 2 years of transformation, of digital transformation.
And in selling online.
In selling online, but also in teleconferencing, in tele-learning, in telehealth, in cocooning, in
Cocooning. What is cocooning?
Cocooning is staying at home.
Okay.
So,
by the way, José Luis, let me just remind people watching the show, if you do have a question for me or for José Luis, if you type it into the chat function, it will magically appear to me here on this iPad. I'm not following the whole chat because there's a lot of conversation in the chat, but we have Sabrina Voss who will copy your questions from the chat onto this device, so I'll be able to ask as soon as I get through my questions, I'll be able to go to your questions.
Mm-hmm. So other things like cashless payments, all these things are things that we were not doing before, or we were just beginning to do, but with the impulse of confinement and coronavirus,
it's accelerated all this stuff.
Yeah, we have accelerated all this. Now we have a different kind of thing coming, which is social distancing. Social distancing has substituted confinement, and social distancing is going to be with us at least until we have a vaccine around. And this may be another year.
Well, you and I are exactly 2 meters apart. If I remember, we set up the chairs today to be so we could take off our masks and actually talk to each other. Let me ask you a question. In this time, José Luis, how have the brands reacted? Have the big brands that we all are familiar with? You asked me to promise not to mention a specific company, so I won't. But how have the big brands reacted to this change in consumer behavior?
Well, big brands, it depends again in the category, no? But they were doing pretty poorly, and they are doing very well, because as one of the things that the consumer has also done has had very little experimentalism. So they have gone for values that they know and they understand forever, and this is usually large brands. Large brands have not even done advertising during this.
But people go back to the brands that they know and trust, the brands that their mother used to use.
And there are categories where they cannot shop them because they are nowhere, and there are other categories where they are available and there are no other brands available. So basically, this has resulted in roughly a cut of 50% of all of advertising investment during all this time. No, so brands have been doing pretty well, but they were not doing pretty well before that. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I wrote.
Yeah. So you wrote a new book. The book is right now it's still in Spanish. It's called Direct to Consumer in Spanish. It's published in March, just before the crisis broke.
Yeah, it was published in March.
So when you talk about a brand which is direct to consumer, and you contrast that in the book with traditional brands, I think you say at one point in the introduction that we are facing unprecedented disruption.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, in the beginning of the reason why I wrote this book is because I noticed that if you went to in the last 5 years to the results of the very large consumer goods brands, what you would see in consumer goods, I'm not talking about garments or other things. I'm talking about FMCGs, no? And if you go to these categories, what you find is that the norm is that in a huge percentage of the categories where they play, and I'm saying between 60 or 80% of the categories where the largest players that you can think about in consumer goods play, they are losing market share. And you say, damn, why? This is strange. What is happening? I mean, these guys are supposed to be concentrating.
These are the big electronics companies, the big clothing companies, and the big department stores.
And the big Coca-Colas of the world, and the big Procter & Gamble's, and all those companies, in the categories where they play, they are losing. In most of the categories, they are losing.
Who are they losing share to?
They are losing to medium-sized brands, but especially to tiny brands which are brands between 20 and 50 million, which are direct-to-consumer brands, which are digital native vertical brands in some cases. In other cases, are simply vertical brands of any origin, which
digital native vertical brands.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Digital native vertical brand is a brand that goes direct to consumer without any kind of intermediation, and usually has a digital origin. So they were born online, they sold direct to the consumer, and in particular, if you look at the subtitle of the book, is what will happen to the world when the millennials run.
It says, "Welcome to 2025, when the millennials are in charge."
Well, the millennials today is all of us, because what is a millennial? I mean,
I'm you and me. Come on, we're not millennials.
we can. You will see. I mean,
I was born in 1962, and I
know,
think you were born in
and
1960.
a millennial is someone that was born in its 1984 and later. But a millennial is also a guy that spends an unusual amount of time depending on screens, in terminals, in something digital. And we have been connected to computers for the last 3 months, an unusual amount of time. So we are all a little bit more millennials than we were previous to this. So something that in particular was thought in terms of discussing the growth of a type of brand because a characteristic of the consumer has become something that is a characteristic of all the consumers right now. And
that characteristic, what's the essence of it?
Well, the essence,
how do you define a direct-to-consumer company?
The essence of a direct-to-consumer company is usually an entrepreneurial company where you have an entrepreneur, a guy that thinks the way to serve a particular need of the consumer by improving the shopper journey or the consumer journey, eliminating any kind of friction that may exist between the consumer and the shopping experience.
Not to mention brands, but Dollar Shave Club.
Dollar Shave Club, for instance. Dollar Shave Club. I mean, when you want to, you probably can relate with me and with Dollar Shave Club very well. Every time that you go to buy a very well-known brand of blades to the supermarket, what you find is a plastic fortress surrounding the
because those blades. Have you heard what's the same between a Ferrari and a pallet of those blades? A pallet, like in the supermarket?
Yeah.
They cost the same as a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Those things are
no,
expensive.
It's absolutely
and by the way,
amazing.
because I teach sustainability, I use old-fashioned razors. So sometimes you see me with a small cut because
What is an old-fashioned razor?
You know, the old blades, the little...
The old Gillettes of 1932?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They still sell them.
They still sell them, yes. Well, but
shaving brush.
But most of us, we don't use this one. We use Fusion.
A Dollar Shave is something which is born online. It's born to be online. It goes.
But it's born to be online because it's hell for you to buy a blade in the supermarket, because in the supermarket this is surrounded by a plastic thing. You have to go to find a clerk that comes with a key, opens this, then you go to the cashier. The cashier, they tell you that this costs even more than you thought. Then you want to return it. You have to. Well, I mean, it's the experience of buying blades is hell. Then what you have is a guy that invents a way of subscribing you to blades. I mean, he tells you, look, we defend the idea that the best shaving is the weekly shaving, where you take a blade every week and you have a fresh blade in your machine. We will subscribe you to 4 blades a month for an amount which is usually a little bit under, but not necessarily, the price of the incumbent brand. And we will deliver it to your house so that you will not have to think about this. And we will tell you that we can do this through social media, and we will tell you that we can only do this and nobody else. So eliminating the friction, telling you that they have eliminated the friction and that them and only them can do that.
So this is what you call direct-to-consumer, people who are doing that, yeah?
This would be a model of DTC, and there are, this is usually something that emerged in the 2010s, more or less 2013, between 2010 and 2013, peaked in 2017, at the time where you had about 6,000 of those brands participated by venture capital.
6,000
Yeah,
brands.
and this is why this is small fish attacking the big fish, which is the big brands, hurt their market share. Because
Now, in this moment in time, a lot of restaurants found that they were either closed or under reduced occupancy, so they started delivering to people's homes. And there's always been home delivery, but I think it's gone up. Have they become DTC companies?
Yeah, they have become DTC companies, and usually their suppliers have also become DTC companies, because if I am a guy that used to sell fish to restaurants and the restaurants are locked, now what I have to do with my fish is to find someone. So enter in your computer, Google, direct fish, direct meat, direct vegetables,
Everything
direct
you can
something.
imagine.
You have a zillion companies there. Now, what is the problem? The problem is that these guys are recent entrants in this business, and they are not like the native DTCs, because the native DTCs, what they had is an excellent model to sell direct to consumer. These other guys have had to improvise this model, and now they have to, in the coming year or something, they have to improve much more their omnichannel capabilities so that they can really serve you.
From Ben about scaling the D2Cs.
DTCs.
How do they get to scale?
How do they get to scale? Well, DTC, if we take an example, if we take large brands, what they do is they try to find the best spot in the shelf in the supermarket and buy it from the supermarket, so that when you go in front of that place, you will buy the product.
Right.
So basically it's a business of buying shelf. DTC is buying consumers. So what you do is you get money, you raise capital with venture capital, and you apply these resources to buy people. So that you have more and more people every time.
Advertising,
through advertising in social media, Instagrams, opinion leaders, influencers, this kind of.
Is it a good time to get in this business? Or is it too late?
I think, look, at the time that COVID started, it was a bad time to get into the business, because venture capital was starting to be a little bit impatient. Because of
they funded 6,000 startups and
nobody was returning what they had entered, because everybody was investing in getting more and more millennials to buy from them. With COVID, what you have had is that suddenly venture capitals have gone, or the money of venture capitalists has gone to finance distressed purchases of distressed hotels and things like this. And now what you have is corporate venture capital that is very interested in having DTC companies. So there are companies that were not going direct to consumer, but they have found that now they can buy one of these companies without paying $1 billion, like Unilever did with Dollar Shave Club just before 2 years ago. and they can do it for much less money, and basically save the entrepreneur and gain the know-how on how to, with using their own products, which are complete and fantastic, use the know-how of the entrepreneur to funnel those products directly to the
So
consumer.
this is a new thing. This is the traditional companies buying into the DTC
And
model,
I think that-
rebranding with the new hip
And
and
I
cool
think-
brand and the Instagram and the.
And I think that all the traditional companies are going to find their way to the consumer by acquiring some of these companies that are around and really need to have, basically the only thing that they did wrong is that they didn't were fast enough in escalating their business by gaining consumers.
Now, there's a bunch of questions before I get to my last questions. There's a series of questions about advertising.
Okay.
You said that advertising has been reduced by 50%, more or less, and depending on the category.
During the COVID, yeah.
During the and the situation, by the way, in Texas and Florida, it's where Spain was 2 months ago. So
Yeah.
this thing is moving around the world at this time. What would be your recommendations regarding, investing in branding? Do you think people should still spend money the way they used to, or should it all go to this DTC model?
No, I mean what I was thinking at the time that the whole pandemic started is that, as usual, recessions are a fantastic moment to make investments in branding, because you have less people making investments in branding, and then you have much less clutter, and the message gets much better to the consumers, and you're in business, no? But what I think also is that what is coming next is going to be brutal in terms of reductions in the consumer. We're going to, every time, in 2007, in 2008, when we got into the global financial crisis, if you had an index of 100 in shopping in apparel in Europe, by 2019, after the recovery, you had an index of 79. So we lost 21 points, which are a combination of consumers buying less because they had less money, demographics, which are much poorer because we are missing several million women, 25 to 35, which are the prime of shopping these kind of products, and then also the prices of apparel, because it was not selling, have fallen. So this has happened.
So the apparel business is smaller today than it was before the crisis.
In 2025, when we look to 2019, we're going to be amazed.
It's going to get smaller still.
Much smaller. Much smaller. I think
This
that
is bad news for the apparel business.
it's not for. It's going to be for all businesses.
All businesses.
All businesses are going to shrink, because every time that we do something, every time that we have a massive crisis like these ones, what we do is we destroy a significant amount of middle class. And middle class we have not produced in proximity more business class than that. I mean, if you go to Asia, you have a ton of new middle class
Well,
there.
going back to this idea that I think you've always been able to spot the trend. Years ago, I remember you were talking about premiumization.
Premiumization.
Premiumization. I don't know if I can even say premiumization. How is this affecting premiumization today?
At the time that I was talking about this, the luxury industry was 20 billion. Right now, the luxury industry is near 2 trillion, if you include automobiles.
It's exploded, yeah?
Yeah, it's massive, no? Premiumization is an aspiration. Right now, premiumization is something addressed to Asians when they stay at home and when they travel. And much more to Asians when they stay home, because they are not going to travel in quite some time. No? So premiumization is where there is a growing, emerging higher middle class. That's not the case in Europe or the US.
So let me finish my question. I'll go back to these guys' questions, because we have lots and lots of questions coming in from the people watching the program all over the world. Here in Spain, at least in my town, I live outside of Barcelona, things are looking back kind of to normal. Some people are wearing masks. There's less tables in the restaurants, but life has come back to the streets. They monitor how many people are on the beach, and they close it if there's too many people. But the beaches are more or less full, and it looks like the world's coming back to some kind of new normal. And in this new normal, José Luis, what do you think is going to happen to brands, to retail in general, and shops, and to restaurants?
Well, let me start by restaurants. No? In restaurants, it's going to depend very much on the measure of social distancing that we keep applying. No? Consumers love to go to restaurants, love to go to bars, but they don't like at all to have to get into a place where they have to wash their hands, where they have to have masks, where they have to be in small groups and and most of the times eating outside. No? Is something that if we find a vaccine fast, then we will recuperate some of them. But restaurants are a business that is low in cash generally. They don't have too many defenses when it comes to a problem like the one that we have now, and they have responded quite well. But it will depend very much on how they consolidate these kind of things. No? Having one shift, 2 shifts, or 3 shifts is a very good idea, and having a delivery in addition to this makes a very nice combination, because in the end, with summing 1 + 1 + 1 plus the delivery, maybe you get 1.
Huh? At 7 p.m., at 8:30 p.m., or at 10 p.m.
And in terms of lunches, I have been in places in Barcelona that have 3 shifts for lunch, which is kind of.
Spaniards start lunch at 1 and.
But it's a good.
Joaquin Duarte from Johnson & Johnson said on this. Nuria Mas, our colleague, interviewed him last night on the same platform, and he said that he expects a vaccine to be ready basically 12 to 18 months from now.
12 to 18.
Can the restaurant survive that long?
I think that those that really take these actions of multiplying their offerings, and also it's very important. It's not only a matter of making 3 shifts. There is an inconvenience in 2 of those shifts. You have to charge me less for this, or you have to charge me more for the best time. Huh? And in addition to this, delivery is going to be essential, because we're going to spend much more time at home and much less going to other places. No? So I think that 18 months is a long time. I am not from Johnson & Johnson, and I cannot give you, and I'm not an epidemiologist, I cannot tell you when. Everything that I have seen is that by June we should be all vaccinated, but vaccinated already. But I don't know. It's a year, so we have to see.
How about shops? How about retail?
Retail is undergoing 2 big problems. The first big problem is it has been shut for 3 months, and these 3 months you're not going to recuperate them. I mean, unfortunately for most retailers, they were shut down in a traditional moment of the year where they have lots of inventories. They have replenished in all the categories of product, and they had been stuck with this merchandise.
The spring-summer clothes collection is.
Yeah, but it's gone. But in addition to this, they are going to get rid of it, and they're going to get rid of it at lousy prices. In fact, it's happening. Stores are at 70% discounts, full assortment. They have everything in every size, and they are empty. So it's something that is like saying, my God, what is going to happen here? The second thing that is coming is the competition of online. Online has been substituting. In countries like Spain, it has gone from 9% to 14%, the market share, which is 5 years in 4 months. It's something.
It was growing 1% a year,
it was growing 1%, and now it has grown in this fashion. And for every 1% of market share that online gains, there are several thousand stores that shut down.
Really?
Yeah. It's
And that's only in Spain. You apply the same
it's
logic.
everywhere.
to
In
the
the U.S., just to give you the data, in the U.S., every point is 10,000
Shops.
stores. Yes. So that means that you have grown in the U.S. from 18 to 26 during this.
So retail is in trouble.
Retail is in serious trouble this
Now,
time.
Marcos asked a question just at the beginning of the broadcast.
And then there is another thing. There are many retailers from chains that will choose not to open, which is not like shutting. It's much easier. So if I have, look at Inditex, profitable every single.
Inditex is the company which has
Zara,
Zara
among
and
others,
a number of other
profitable
brands.
every year, every quarter for 40 years. Has had
You used
its
to be on the board.
No, I wasn't on the board.
You were on the,
I was working.
You were working for them.
These guys had the first quarter with losses was announced in March, and the company lost 25% market cap in that single announcement. And they also announced another thing. They announced that they were shutting down 1,200 stores of their 7,500 stores or something like this, which is a significant, not shutting down, not opening, which is, and this is going to happen in not reopening, and this is why retailing is in that shape.
But while online is growing and while direct to consumer is growing, it's still not the majority. How can a brand move in that direction without upsetting its retailers and without ending up between two different places?
To get them upset, they will have to wait for them to reopen. Because, I mean, what can you do? I mean, you were not open, so I had to sell somewhere, and I'm doing it DTC. And that's what is really happening. No? And then the other thing that is going to happen with DTC is that 3 years from now, 4 years from now, you're going to have lots of DTC chains opening stores, because the prices of stores are going to be so low after this massive, the rentals are going to be so low after this massive close down of
the digital
players.
natives, the direct to consumers, excuse me, you think they'll go into retail?
Yeah.
Like Amazon has done by buying.
Well, but seriously, in terms of what I mean is opening hundreds of stores. No, well, you mean by buying Whole Foods? Yes, right, in this fashion. Yeah, and I think that they are going to be opening many stores because they will be accessible, and because in the end, retail will still rule. We will have 70% of retail in 2024 still in Spain or in Southern Europe. You will have 70% still of physical retail.
Why? Because people like shopping?
Because we love to touch and feel, because we like cheap, and cheap usually is only stores. I mean, one of the cases that surprises me is Primark. Primark, they don't go online, and they don't go online because they don't have margin to go online. They cannot deliver the goods and make some money with it because it's tremendously cheap. You go to La Ia, the only store that is packed with a line of
La
of
Ia
100 people.
is a shopping center here in Barcelona.
Is Primark. And you go to England and it's the same thing. And you go anywhere in the world where there is a Primark, the US, what you will find is the longest lines are in the doors
Because
of
it's
Primark.
cheap and people get to touch the clothes.
And also, but especially in the case of Primark, is because it's cheap.
But does that mean that we're just going to go full circle, that this is going to be like a wind which washes through, some brands go away, other brands will replace them, and if you went to sleep today and woke up in 2030, you would say, well, nothing's changed except the brands?
Partly you could say that. I mean, and it is...
And I guess the store owners will be getting less rent.
And I go again to
So
my
the
book.
wrong business is to be in the shopping center business.
And shopping centers are going to have shopping centers have a problem. The stores that disappear are in 60% of all the shopping centers that you know. And shopping centers are the ones that are going to be probably more affected by the closure of stores. If
So
you
they're
have a
gonna have to
shopping,
drop their rents to rock bottom.
yeah,
New stores will
yes,
come
but
in.
anyway, if you have a shopping center that has only has a 30% vacancy, it doesn't last too long. It doesn't last too long. People don't like to go, but specifically women don't want to go to a place that is one half dark because the stores are closed. So it's something that
So we get dead shopping centers.
you had that shopping center.
That happens in the States. I've seen.
Yeah,
some.
you have, yeah, and the United States you're having many because you are over shopping centered. You have
Over
too
shopping
many.
centers.
You have too many. It's and that's problematic.
So
in-
José Luis, this DTC, direct to consumer phenomenon, is that all segments? I mean, you've been talking about retail, clothes. You've been talking about the shave club. You talked a little bit about restaurants, cars. I mean,
Well,
are there segments which are kind of immune to this whole DTC phenomenon? Or do you-
cars are clearly DTC, no? For instance, you basically can find it in
Oh,
any company
Tesla-
of cars,
Tesla,
but you
I
look at Tesla, and Tesla is
Tesla's
overwhelming.
yeah, they have their own stores.
Mhm.
Because
Yep.
it doesn't have to be digital, right? DTC.
It's and it's not about selling you the car. It's about selling you experience. I mean, you go there, and it's lifestyle. What you're having is the lifestyle of Tesla is set in the place
I'm a
so that.
professor. I drive a Toyota. I can't afford the Tesla.
I used to drive this kind of cars when I was doing sectorial industry.
But DTC doesn't have to be digital. It can be.
No, it doesn't have to. I mean, you have many cases. For instance, let me tell you a case that is fantastic, and because it includes all the phenomenons of this. Is Tails.com. Tails.com is a company that was Tails, like the dog Tails. It was a UK company, and what they did is they will pass you a questionnaire asking you characteristics of your dog, and they will ask you 30 questions
Of your dog.
of your pet, the dog, and asking you the breed of the dog, the age, the weight, height, if it's the character, if it moves a lot or it's quiet or so on. Then they would take this information, and with 20 nutrients, they would custom made food stuff for your dog, and they would subscribe you to it, and they know perfectly how much does your dog need to eat because you have given them this information in your questionnaire.
Right.
So they deliver the product to you with the frequency that your dog needs to have this product. Now, guess what? Dogs always get out of food stuff on Saturdays. I don't know why, but it's always on Saturdays. On Saturdays, you have to get into the car, go to the nearest gas station to get a food stuff that is not the food that your dog needs, and eventually you're unhappy because the dog is not
Tails
eating.
again, they figured out a pain point. They figured out a way to solve it. They offered people the right food for their dog, which comes out on
And then
time.
they sit down to wait Nestle to buy them for 140 million, which they did 3 years ago. So that's,
So if you were a DTC, that's the plan. And if you're Nestle, you should find these guys and buy them as soon as you
of
can.
course, yes. You have to buy these
Now, if
companies.
everybody goes in the same direction, how do you differentiate yourself? How does one DTC brand differentiate itself from another, which is trying to reach the same people?
Well, you try, if you are Nestle, what you try to do is you try to differentiate by finding the best DTCs that are in the lot to be bought.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's a question from Marcos. He's saying, you're talking about millennials, and you said that we're millennials. But Marcos is saying, shouldn't we focus on the over 60s? Because demographically, there's a lot more over 60s in certain countries around the world than there are millennials.
I am over 60, so I can
Not much.
sympathize by several weeks, but I can sympathize very much with that proposition. I think that he's pretty right. There is a whole food field in DTC, which is wellness, and wellness is offering many products to improve the skin conditions and the
The
mobility, the
color, God knows what else,
these kind of
all
things
kinds of crazy
of
stuff,
the
yeah.
elderly, and there are many companies there, and there are many. I have been talking specifically about subscription, but you can buy directly, you can buy subscription, and you can buy with a service. And there is a lot of this business of buying with a service, which is also DTC, and
So
includes these
DTC is
categories.
anything where the company goes straight to the consumer
Yeah,
and either owns the retail channel or ignores the retail channel,
yeah.
but has a personal relationship with the
Yeah.
consumer. Is that the fundamental idea?
And also an ability to collect a lot of data from that consumer so that they can customize the products. One of the characteristics that DTC has is that they don't have massive product lines. They are very much niche products that as they become successful, the line is grown. But
Yeah, we had a session with one of our colleagues, Samsa Samila, on AI. And he said, this is the beginning of the AI revolution. It started a few years ago. And is that connected? Is AI connected to this DTC
of
thing?
course,
Because
of course.
you are the HQ chair.
Intent HQ.
Intent HQ chair, and Intent
Yep.
HQ is in fact a company which does market
Yeah.
research using AI. Can you talk a little bit about how AI fits into this whole DTC phenomenon?
It does. I mean, not only AI on one hand, but on the other hand, in general, very large data sets of whatever consumers do. No? The companies that we have, the traditional brands, are companies that usually buy their data from the AC Nielsen's and the Kantar Medias of the world, which do a fantastic job of selling to you syndicate data, which is data that they collect on behalf of their clients, and they sell to all of the clients that they have. Companies like Intent HQ, what they do is they gain insights from every consumer of in particular, Intent does it with telephone companies' data, but they could do it perfectly well with direct-to-consumer data as well. And there are companies that specialize in direct-to-consumer data in order to collect observations and learn from the observations they collect.
So lots more questions to try to get into. We've got 7 minutes left or 8 minutes left. Will things go back to normal someday, after the vacation period, after the vaccine, or is normal just not even the right
I
way
think
of
no.
thinking?
I think that we're going back to a completely different place. I mean, it's going to be a very different world in terms of this. I was looking just at the incidents that people that don't want to go back to their office will have in things. No? If I don't want to go back to the office, or my company needs to restructure or needs to reduce costs, one of the most relevant costs that they can reduce is the cost of rentals of offices and things like this. No? So it makes sense to send people home 2 days a week, 3 days a week,
So
or
we're
all
going
the
to close
week.
the office parks and the shopping centers and redesign
Now,
our
where are the
cities?
stores right now? The stores are, in many cases, near the offices where you go to work. Why? I mean, what do I do with my previous set of my previous network of stores? I have to change it. I have to think about something else. No, you go for the changes of consumer behavior that we're going to see, and every change in consumer behavior that we have has a tremendous incidence in many other things. No,
Is this going to bring the high street back?
it could be a good idea.
Because if you
Unfortunately,
think about over the last 20 years, a lot of the high streets or the centers of towns have kind of hollowed out as people have gone to the malls, they've gone to the Walmarts, they've gone to where the offices are. Is this going to bring life back to
That
our
would
towns
be-
and villages?
that would be absolutely fantastic.
That would be wonderful, right?
There was that book of this guy was Harrison, the guy that was a writer in the New Yorker, and he wrote about the city of New York, and he said that in every two streets, every two blocks in New York, you had a completely different set of bars, supermarkets,
Absolutely.
shoemakers, laundries, groceries, and that if you moved from this block to this other block, you change completely from that ecosystem.
My cousin has lived in the same place for 30 years. He loves New York. He thinks it's a village.
Yeah, because
Because he never moves from this.
well, that's the way that it has been there forever. No, I think that this is changing there, and I think that this has changed completely in Europe. No, in Europe we have lost this fabulous ecosystem, and I don't think that our municipal authorities have the clarity to spot what is going on here. That without commerce there is no taxes, and without
Yeah, but
taxes,
maybe this will flip things around. I don't know.
let's see.
There's a bunch of questions about the pent-up demand. You know, is this going to mean that the holiday season is going to be a crazy consumer orgy of spending because people have saved some money?
Christmas?
Christmas?
I don't think so.
No?
No. I think that is when it is definitely when we will see what kind of damages is the COVID going to do, no? But I also have seen some statistics recently that tell us that we will end this year with 60%, including Christmas, with 60% less sales than 2019. And we will not recuperate 2019 levels of profitability until 2023. So that means that we have several Christmas in between. Next year's Christmas is going to be a phenomenal Christmas, the Christmas of 2022. Okay. Because we closed 2022 with an 80% growth on the previous year.
Is omni-channel dead?
Omni-channel? No, omni-channel is alive and well. I mean, omni-channel is the proof that the old model of retail can only survive if the new model of retail does not embrace omni-channel. I mean, omni-channel.
Omni-channel means you sell online, you sell through retail sales,
I create the order online, and I collect physically.
Whatever, you do everything.
These type of things. But what we have proved to the consumer this time, in this occasion in Europe, there was 15% of people that bought online that had never ever bought online, and they tested it. No, so only 50% of these guys will return to shop online because they were deceived by what they got online. If you have omni-channel, then you would have had 80% instead of 50%, and that would have been positive. The top thing that they have to do is to go back to my book of 3 years ago, which was called the Demise of Main Streets and the Growth of the New Omnichannel Model, and adopt this book first, and then adopt this other one.
Sustainability. There's 2 or 3 questions on environmental sustainability.
Okay.
Will people demand, because all of this online stuff requires more packaging, more cartons, more plastic. Will this make the situation better or worse? Is sustainability going to be part of the consumer product conversation, or will it go away?
No. I think that if you look at this, only in January, sustainability was producing, and I'm not saying this because you're a sustainability professor, but I really believe that sustainability was the top claim that the consumers were making of companies in January of this year. I think that in their return, sustainability is going to keep being, to maintain its importance as a central tenet of what is going on. And only companies that can prove that they are sustainable will come back.
So let me close with this question about DTC, which is about customer acquisition costs. And it seems that there's a professor from Harvard who says that, that as things heat up, the acquisition costs go up, which kind of puts a limit to the scale that these DTC can get. Is that true?
It's true, and it's happening right now. The costs of Instagrams, the costs of celebrities, worse, the cost of a celebrity with a little impact, a celebrity that has 100,000 followers is nothing that makes sense to use for your communication. This may push, again, it's the same thing, no? The costs of traditional advertising will go down, and it will start making sense to adopt traditional media in order to support direct-to-consumer awareness.
So we're just going to go full circle again.
Yeah, but look, it makes a lot of sense, because in the end, what you are going to have in doing this with traditional media is learning to do things in a different fashion. Now you have many direct-to-consumer companies that are doing shares for advertising deals. So they go to a TV station and they tell them, I give you 5% of the company, but you give me all the passes that I want in television of the company that I have. And they are accepting this. And you have many companies that are DTC companies advertising television because they are not spending out-of-pocket amounts in paying the advertising campaign, but they are paying with shares, or they are paying with stock options of the company on the basis of results. No? So if these kind of things happen, then why couldn't you have this? But it's what this colleague is raising is completely true. I mean, there is a loss of efficiency of the traditional media that you were using because there is too much competition. There are too many DTC brands advertising for the same Instagram celebrity, and there are also traditional brands which are adopting the DTC model in order to become relevant to the millennials, to the younger consumers.
The younger millennials and the older millennials.
Younger and older millennials. That's
José
right.
Luis Nueno, author of Direct to Consumer. It's still in Spanish. He promised me there will be an English edition someday.
And it will be shorter and in English.
And in English and in Kindle, right?
In Kindle, yep.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Stay tuned for more announcements. We're actually going to wind down this series of broadcasts because at least in parts of the world we are coming out of the crisis. Other parts are still in it, as we know, which is very, very concerning. Next week we'll have two sessions, one in Spanish, which will be about how the Spanish economy is trying to come back, and how we're a panel discussion on jobs in Spain. And on the 16th will be I'll have myself and a number of my colleagues to kind of come full circle to where we started the series, talking a little bit about how the crisis has affected different aspects of business, supply chain, economics, managing people and organizations, etc. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful evening or a wonderful day, depending upon what part of the world you're in.
Thank you.